Hello, in this Bandage video, I'd like to cover the most important settings for controlling the shape of the drawn assembly graph. I'll first load up a bacterial assembly, which has some very long contigs that are hundreds of kilobases. Now, long contigs are a good thing, but with Bandage's default settings, it makes for some very thin nodes, so much so that the graph is hard to see without zooming in. Now, recall that nodes in Bandage are made of line segments. So what we want here is to have fewer line segments on these long nodes. This is done by increasing the first setting, base pairs per segment. I'll make it 10 times larger. What this means is that nodes 5,000 base pairs or fewer will be drawn as a single line segment. Nodes between 5,000 and 10,000 base pairs will be drawn as 2 line segments, and so on. I have to redraw the graph to see this change, and when I do, we've gotten what we wanted, shorter nodes for the long contigs. Now I'd like to cover the second setting, graph layout iterations. This controls how long the graph layout algorithm spends positioning the nodes. If I turn it down, you can see that the graph layout happens very quickly, but the nodes can look a bit messy with weird bends like this. If I turn the setting up, the graph layout algorithm will take longer, but give smoother results. Though even at higher settings, the layout isn't always perfect, as you can see over here with 2 nodes that are crossing. So you can always click Draw Graph again to get a different layout. There are 2 settings that control node width. The first is average node width. Turning it up will make the nodes thicker, and turning it down will make them thinner. You can see it's not necessary to redraw the graph to see these changes. The second setting controls the effect coverage has on a node's thickness. So if I put it up to 100, then there's a perfect correspondence between coverage and thickness. This node has about half the coverage of this node, so it's drawn at half the thickness. If I turn that setting down to 0, then coverage has no effect, and all nodes will have the same thickness. Now let's look at a very different graph, one from Trinity that is made of many short nodes. Here we see that every node has about the same length. Even nodes that are only 1 base pair, and nodes that are over 1,000 base pairs. This is because they are all shorter than the base pairs per segment setting. So for this graph, let's turn that setting way down to only 5. It now takes a bit longer to do the graph layout because the long nodes have many more line segments. Now the nodes are too thin to see easily, so let's increase their thickness. And that's better. Now we have a much tighter correlation between how many base pairs are in a node and how long it appears in Bandage, which is appropriate for a graph like this that consists of many short nodes. That's all for this video. I hope it's given you a better idea of how to use Bandage's settings to control the shape of your graph.